Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast sponsored by Lone Oak Coffee. Visit loneoakcoffee.com. Use promo code COFFEE2020 for a discount, and that's LONEOAK coffee.com. Today, we discuss Washington's first loss of the season, an ugly 30-15 defeat at Arizona. I'll be joined by Michael Phillips of the Richmond Times Dispatch, who was in Glendale. I was actually at FedEx Field, not because I forgot where the game was, but this is the new life in COVID. I'm writing a story about what it was like to broadcast a game when you're not there. Look for that later in the week on ESPN.com. But you're here to talk about and commiserate about the game, so let's get to it. Here are a few observations. This will sound like an excuse, but it's not. It's reality and something I've said for a while. It will take time for this team to develop and grow. If indeed it does, it was always going to take time. After beating Philly last week, I was asked in my mailbag if this changed my expectations for the season. I said no, it did not, and days like Sunday are why. They're not set up to have that sort of success this year. It's a young team with a lot of holes. I was talking to another NFC scout last week who saw that opener, and his comment was, they're going to struggle. They have holes. It's reality. What you need to see is how do they respond this week to an ugly loss. You can develop the mindset, and you need to do it. So if you want, because you need that if you're going to build anything. During the week, Coach Ron Rivera said it would take the offense a while, maybe another year before it hit a stride. I completely agreed with that assessment. I didn't take it as a coach making an excuse. I felt he was being brutally honest. This team was not set up to have instant offensive success, and you just have to understand that. You know, it's hard because you've heard this for so many years, and you're being asked to be patient once again. It's just the situation they're in, and people got to be honest with it. They're not set up to have that kind of success. They can play better, but they're not set up to have great success. But yes, expect better play. They have a quarterback who now has made 9 starts in the NFL and plays behind a line that needs to be upgraded and with skill talent that must be upgraded as well. Dontrell Inman is their 3rd receiver right now. Let that sink in. It's going to take a while. This was a 3-13 team, folks. It wasn't just about coaching or Bruce Allen. But this is the remnants of that regime, and they're not going to go out and give up the sort of draft capital it would take to go get a top receiver at this point. Listen, people, this might end up to be a top 10 draft pick when it's all said and done. You're not going to give that kind of stuff up right now, knowing that your team is not at a point where you could, if let's say you went out and got a receiver, where is this team then? It's just not where you need to be. So you need to hold on to that capital and then, again, see what you have now and build for the future or build for next year. But there's no doubt that the shopping list will be long this summer. The guy I'm curious to see at some point is Sadiq Charles. I have a feeling we'll see him relatively soon. That's not something I've been told, but what I do know is that they were excited about him before he got hurt this summer and feel he can play either guard or tackle. He won't be the answer for the overall woes, but if he can go out and play well this season at either spot, then you can cross another need or one need off the list. I get into the first field goal with Michael Phillips later on, and I'm a bit torn on Ron Rivera going for that field goal. Ultimately, he read his team just like he read it last week against the Eagles. They had momentum in that game, so the call to go for it on 4th down was an easy one. In this game, they had no momentum, and I don't know what the analytics say to do in that situation, but the on-field product suggested that converting would have been difficult. But the other part of me says if you're trying to win, does it matter if it's 20-0 or 20-3? I guess it does for Rivera, and that's his belief, and he's the head coach. It does show how, I do think it shows how young this team is. I wonder if it had been a more veteran team if he would have made that same decision or felt the need to do so. But part of that growing process apparently is making sure to develop that confidence, and the offense did get it going late. So I do think that decision is played into a long-term picture here. I also get into this with Michael later, and we talked about Troy Apke during the week last week. The scout I talked to during the week considered him a special teams player. I know the organization liked his development in the offseason. All we knew this summer is that he looked good in practice. And the other safeties, he looked better than the other safeties at that spot. I also know I always pointed out that it's hard to accurately gauge a safety based just on practice. But a guy like that, players like Wes Martin, etc., absolutely needed a preseason. Apke has to improve. I don't know what he saw in that deep ball today or why he was so shallow. I just know that receivers keep getting behind him, and for a guy whose speed is a top asset, that's not good. That's about playing with your eyes better, knowing the situation, knowing who you're going against, and all that. And I think there's a ways to go there. If he gets there, I don't know. Last year, the coaches were reluctant to use Steven Sims in a return role because they worried about his decision-making and his ball security. That fumble today was a killer. Sure, he's going for an extra yard, but the number one job of returner is to make sure you secure the ball. He's been loose with the ball at times as a receiver, too. I do like what he offers. I think he can be good as a slot receiver, but this team can't afford big mistakes on special teams, too. Haskins continues to look like an inexperienced quarterback. I know Twitter loves instant judgments, but that's not my thing. I do know he has to get more help. I also know he has to be more accurate. His mechanics are off enough to make him inconsistent with his accuracy. That's something I'll be watching when looking back at the game. Did that improve in the second half in the fourth quarter? Why was he having more success? Was it just a matter of Arizona's coverage changing a little bit and getting more opportunities for Terry McLaurin? Or was there something else going on with Haskins? Were his mechanics better? That's something I want to see. I do know that his early struggles did not help. But again, was it all his fault? Clearly not. Rivera is committed to Haskins, and I think that's a good thing. I like the way he talks to him on the sidelines during the game. I think they have a good plan for trying to develop him. Whether or not it works, we'll see. But I do know they have a plan. And yes, you can judge Haskins this season, but you also have to do it knowing how other aspects play into his failures, be it the line play or the receivers. And again, I've told you this before, the team knows how to judge this quarterback. Here's part of the way you judge Haskins. How does he respond this week? What's he doing? Is he coming in earlier? Staying later? What's his response to a tough game? Again, 9 starts. You have to judge every aspect of his game, and that's leadership. That's how he's handling himself, how he is after the games, and all that. So I think there's a ways to go with him, in addition to, obviously, they need to get him more help in the future. But I will say this. I do like Antonio Gibson. I like that he continues to flash. I think he and Terry McLaurin are bright spots for that offense, and I think J.D. McKissick will turn into one as well. I think he definitely offers something. McLaurin was terrific, and we know that. And I think they've got to get him more involved early. And Michael and I get into this later too, so I'll save it for there. They do have some players to build around. I just think there are so many questions. Some weeks those questions will provide okay answers and Washington will win. Some weeks it will look ugly. I've always said this season is about the second half of the year. The coaches will know a lot more about what they have, and at that point you need to be showing progress. I think a lot of coaches in this situation are kind of looking this as like these first several games almost like an extended preseason because they didn't have that, and there's so much that these guys don't know. I'll give you an example. They had one thought on Sean Dion Hamilton based on their play without pads before the hitting began in camp. They didn't like him that much. Then he gets in pads, then they liked him a lot more. The point is not so much that Sean Dion Hamilton, so he didn't have much of a role today, but the point of that is that there's still a lot more they have to learn. They're going to see one thing here and see another thing here. So they needed games to see what some of these guys can do, and then you get to know. So this really is a learning process for them as well. They don't know all that they have here. That's not easy. So that's why it's going to be a difficult situation for a little bit. It's going to be up and down. They'll know a lot more what they have in the second half of the year, and at that point you need to be showing, again, legitimate progress. You shouldn't have been throwing parades after last week. You can't cut every player or make all sorts of trades this week. And I wasn't hot on a couple coaching decisions going for too late in the game when it was 27-15. They had a chance to cut it to 11, make it a field goal and a touchdown to tie. However, regardless, and should you even say however regardless, one or the other, come on, you can nail me on that. Regardless, though, at some point, they'd have to convert a 2-point attempt. So whether they do it now or later, they were going to have to do it at some point. But it would have made it it gives you a better chance, maybe psychologically it helps you. And maybe I would say probably by the book, you should have kicked or you should have just kicked it. But again, at some point, you had to convert the 2-pointer. Rivera also said he didn't take his timeouts late because in essence, he felt the game was over, didn't want to get guys hurt. I think when he answered that question in the post-game presser, he was probably thinking about the timeouts on the very last possession. Like, why run more in that situation? I would agree. I think the question, I think some of that was probably more about on Arizona's drive and stopping the clock. But the problem is they could barely get into third down, let alone stop or to get them off the field. So if they could have gotten them to some third downs, you probably take a timeout. But on second down early in those drives, and I think there was only one third down on that drive, or maybe two. But point is, they weren't stopping them, and I don't know that it was going to matter. But I also do think that Rivera is trying to get a feel for this team and where they're at, and he's really working on building the psychology of this team. It feels like, or at least harping a lot on that as much as anything. So we'll see where this goes, folks. But that there was not a pretty game. And again, how do you respond? That's what growth is about. How do you respond? That's it for me. After this break, I'll be back with Michael Phillips of the Richmond Times Dispatch as we discuss the key parts of Washington's loss.
Support for this podcast comes from the IT experts at CDW, people who get it. At CDW, we get the future workplace works differently.
Today's my first day back. Almost forgot what floor we were on.
Understandable. But with modern health and safety technology orchestrated by CDW, the future can work better. Technology like thermal screening and occupancy tracking enables employees to walk confidently into the office.
Wait, this isn't my floor. Is this even my building?
Even if it's been a while. IT orchestration by CDW. People who get it. Find out more at cdw.com/future of work.
You've heard me talking about Lone Oak Coffee for a couple months now. Let me tell you a little bit about who they are and what they're about. Lone Oak Coffee is based in the Shenandoah Valley, just a nice bunch of people who are open for business during this trying time. Just look at their website, loneoakcoffee.com, and what do they highlight? Their core values of quality, family, transparency. They work with co-op farmers from all over the world to source their beans. They also support small farmers to find the right beans. During this pandemic, one of my saving graces has been grinding my beans from Lone Oak Coffee and taking a few minutes before the day to savor the coffee, get my mind right. Put a little jazz or Frank Sinatra or Louis Armstrong on in the background, it's even better. I've enjoyed all their blends, but among my favorites, the Ethiopian Guji, love the berry flavor, the Mexican Chiapas, and their house blend. Start your day off right with Lone Oak Coffee. Visit loneoakcoffee.com, that's LONEOAK coffee.com. Use promo code COFFEE2020 for a discount. You can thank me later. Michael, first of all, you were there. I was back here at FedEx Field doing a story on the broadcast crew. Just being there, being here on this end, it was really, you never really got the sense they were going to crawl back in this game. But I'm curious, what was your sense being at the game? Did it ever feel like this was anything other than just a solid Cardinals win?
It was a Cardinals win front to back, that's for sure. I thought that there were going to be some real positives to build on there. I'm thinking of that touchdown drive that made it 27-9. I thought that was a really nice drive by Haskins. They kind of gave it back defensively after that. Arizona had their way with them most of the game. The surprise for me was, I guess I'll say, how seriously Arizona took the game for all 60 minutes. They did not let off the gas. They continued to go for it. They continued to run what I thought were their best plays. And certainly on a day where they could have coasted this thing in for an easy win, they went for it for 60 minutes. And I think that was probably on their side, their coach sending a message to their team.
They're going for it on a fourth down, keeping their own territory at a time. You can look at it two ways. One, they have a lot of confidence, but they didn't also feel threatened at all by what this offense might do against them.
It was straight disrespect to Dwayne Haskins and company, and frankly, it was deserved. Haskins needed that drive where he kept finding Terry McLaurin. That was, that salvaged what I think otherwise you would have graded as probably a D or a D- day for him. Yeah. We saw a lot of the things that we pointed out last week, and obviously winning fixes so many things. But Ron Rivera tried to tell us all week, hey, the offense isn't rolling like we want it to be. This is a long process. I think a lot of people didn't hear that because of the win, but we saw the same things today. He's just not – the throws don't have the touch on him. He's not putting it right where he needs to be. There are a lot of things he's going to need to go back to the drawing board on, but I do think Rivera continues to communicate his full commitment to Haskins, to developing him, to spending this year and really working with him. I think that's important for Dwayne to hear. I think that's important for the fans to hear. He's not going to bail on him for having bad games. He will stick by him.
Sure. And I think the problem here, Michael, is it's not just the quarterback. It's a
No.
growing pain all up and down that offensive roster outside of Terry McLaurin. I mean, really, that's, he's the only one you say, okay, where he's at. That's the problem for Dwayne, is that, there are definitely things he has to do better. But then you look at that offensive line, or what kind of help are they giving him? What kind of help are you getting over here? And, it was never, and this felt like I wouldn't say should be obvious, but like, you knew that this offense was up against it from the jump, because it was not put up this year for them to come out and get off to a strong start. So, but, I think that's one of the things you have to wonder, what part, and I asked this on social media, but like, what part are growing pains and what part is the talent deficiency?
Yeah, and things aren't going to get easier with it. I don't want to assume, but Brandon Sheriff's going to be out for a little while.
Right.
Looking at that tape, certainly. I'll leave that to the Twitter doctors to fully diagnose before we get the word tomorrow. But that was an ugly one. And I wrote this, and that is that we judge Brandon Sheriff very harshly, and that's because he wants to be the highest paid right guard. He's getting franchise tag money, so we grade him on that curve. But when you step away from that, there will be a massive drop off in production at that position. And that's no knock on Wes Schweitzer. That's just to say the other guy was a top 5 pick in the NFL.
And Brandon, I don't know that Brandon was playing at that level either yet. And so that's one of the things that but there is, regardless, there's going to be a drop off. And that had to be the side of the line that was the anchor, with he and Moses and their experience, compared to Martin and Kristen on the other side, which that's not an anchor. So, but yeah, you have to figure that he would be lost for I don't want to speculate because we don't know yet. So we'll find out Monday what his status is, but it certainly didn't look good. What did you think about like the way they finished? Can they build off that? Can they build off Antonio Gibson?
Gibson, but I thought J.D. McKissick had some nice plays as well. We saw a little bit about what he's going to be capable of on third downs. Peyton Barber kind of cemented himself as the guy who gets a yard on 4th and 1 a role. Everybody's got their little niche here, so you're waiting to see who develops there. You're certainly waiting for Logan Thomas, Dontrell Inman, maybe to pop a little bit, give you a little something that hasn't quite happened yet. I think that you say, how can we feed Terry McLaurin even more? How can we force him to be a part of the game? And that's not easy to do, because when defensive coordinators turn on the tape of this team, that's the guy they're scared of, is 17. They're not scared of anybody else. So it's going to be very hard to keep Terry involved and engaged. But if you can do it, you see how big that payoff is. He's so much better than the other pass catching options. You got to find a way to get him involved and get him involved often.
And it took him a little while to get to him too. Part of that was not converting third downs, but they didn't attempt to. I don't think they even targeted him until it was deeper into the second quarter before he got a target. And that's a hard thing to do when he is your number one playmaker, and that's a hard way to go. What did you make of with Rivera going for the field goal versus touchdown on that first scoring drive?
I like it, and I think that there's a huge difference between 0 and any other number. And Sam Fortier of the Washington Post and I were arguing about this. I understand why everybody wanted him to go for it. Everybody wanted Rivera to play for the win. Rivera wasn't playing for the win. Rivera was playing for this to not be an embarrassment, for this to be something where he could take positives instead of leaving with a 0. If the score is 23-3 and they're in that situation, sure, go for it, because that's the smart play, is to go for it and try to cut it to a 2-possession game. To me, 0 is just such a glaringly bad number. I think Rivera did not want to leave here sporting that 0.
I understand the other side, though, because you do want, last week you go for that 4th down. Hey, you're playing to win. And now it's about, I want to get that goose egg off the board. And, what's the mentality that you're building with either one of those? And I think you go case by case with that. But that's part of what I also wonder there too. Was that kind of what Sam was saying, or is he trying to, or was Sam having some sort of silly prop bet that he won money on off that? That's an inside joke, folks.
He's always working those angles. It's I fully understand the line of thinking where you say we need to play for the win, we need to communicate we're playing for the win, and obviously that's what going for it there would have done. I also think, let's be honest about what this offense was today. Were they going to convert that play 4th and 6? I think the odds are they were not going to convert that play.
Yeah, I think
there's I don't need to be Sam Fortier running the numbers to give you that prop bet. I don't think they were going to get it.
Yeah, Sam has his 1-800 lock of the week for next week too. So, yeah, and I think the other thing that was disappointing to me, because like I said, the offensive struggles are going to happen. That again, there's too many parts here that are new. It's the off season they've had, et cetera, new coach, et cetera. The defense, I felt like just they've got to be more stout, and they can't keep, it's 2 games in a row or his first series drive. They harass the hell out of, but they've got to be better overall and more consistent overall, because that's the group that has to carry this team.
Well, and what you saw today was a particularly bad mismatch when you talk about Kyler Murray being able to avoid that defensive line. The defensive line's going to have to do the heavy lifting here. I thought Kevin Pierre-Louis had a nice game. I know there were some plays where Jimmy Moreland got beat, but I think he continues to develop into a potential NFL starter caliber player. But the defensive line's going to have to carry the load, and this was always going to be a bad matchup for them. You look ahead to week 4 in Baltimore. Lamar Jackson's going to make these guys look silly. Once he gets to the second level, he's just a better player than these guys are. So it was always going to be a bad matchup, but you're right that they do need more from the guys who are not the defensive line. One thing, people say, the front 7. It's not the front 7, it's the front 4 that's doing well right now. It's the back 7 that aren't carrying the load. I thought Deron Payne had a great game today, by the way.
He did.
You really noticed him and his impact on the game. If this is another game against Carson Wentz, maybe they make some of those plays that allow them to stay in the game, win the game, and they'll get more opportunities to do that. Even Baker Mayfield is a guy who they should be able to get to, should be able to make some impact plays against. But this was a bad matchup.
The Troy Apke experiment, I'm going to be curious to see where they go with this, because one of the hardest positions to really tell in a practice is safety. You have to be in a game. And so, I know that they've seen improvement, but that's 2 weeks in a row where last week against the Eagles, he could have given up a couple of big plays, did not, or he did some of those deep balls that were directly in his area, as opposed to today, he certainly did. And the Kyler Murray misses, he does that to everybody. But you've got to be more consistent in that back end and coverage and taking angles and all that. And that's one of the things that I know fans are going to sit there and harp on that, even, because he's going to become the whipping boy for this season whenever there's anything's go wrong. But he's got to be better. They've got to be better in the secondary overall in those cases. So do you think some of that is just a function, not just with him, but some of those plays they've given up, a function of this is, again, new group, communication takes time, new coaching staff, et cetera, or is it just a matter? You think that's a fair excuse for them, or is that just an excuse?
Yeah, and I think you look at, they could have kept Sean Davis. They could have gone out and got somebody. Those were options available to them. They could have done that. I think it's a statement by Rivera. He's committed to building around young guys, letting these guys take their lumps and develop. The question is, when do you pull the plug on that experiment? That week 2 is not the answer, of course, but it's time to start having that discussion. If Apke looks like this in week 10, is it time to say, next man up, let's start developing somebody? When do you make that ruling that this is not the kid to build around? And you got to have that discussion in a lot of different positions as well. But the third downs, man, were killer both ways. Killer what they were doing, allowing them from Arizona. And I guess I would say it was more the second downs that were killer. And Rivera mentioned this offensively. Yeah. Second and 1 turns into 3rd and 4, or 2nd and 11 after a penalty. You work so hard to put yourself in that situation, and then to squander it is very frustrating.
It is, and that's but you're right about, like, with going back to a guy like Apke, because that's where I go back to. Is it a growing pain, or is it just he's a better special teamer? Is that and I think I know some fans have their answers on that. I don't know that the coaches, more importantly, have their answer on that. But that's the thing I think that's going to be a lot about is what the season is about, is finding that answer.
I'm also curious, and you may have some perspective on this, where Cameron Curl ends up as well, because he's a guy who clearly they're training to do a lot of different things.
He is, and I don't know about him deep at this point because we haven't seen him in that role. I know in camp we saw him a little bit, but again, it's hard to always tell. And like Apke, when we saw practice, for who he is, he looked fine. I mean, you can't say it's like, oh, he just, but again, you don't see, you're not playing a game in practice, so you're not seeing the end result of a play. And you're not seeing a team game planning to maybe get something against you. And, so I'll be curious to see where that goes. And listen, I don't know that he's the biggest problem on that team, certainly, but it is certainly a big question mark moving forward that has to be answered. They've got to find some sort of positive answer. But again, that's what I say, Michael, you look at this first 2 weeks now, you have a game, you're down 17-0, you come back, great mindset, resilient. Now you have 17-0 and you just looked ugly most of the game. And I just kind of think this is probably who they are, don't you think?
Yeah, and your comment about, not being able to tell from practice, I think really sheds light on, you don't want this to be like the comedic excuse where like we keep saying it so it's ridiculous, but they didn't have an off season. Like it is fair to say they didn't have an off season. They didn't have joint practices. They didn't have preseason games where they went against other teams, and that hurt Ron Rivera's ability to make evaluations on these guys. It's fair to say all that. We'll have to quit saying that at some point because I know fans don't want to hear that at a certain point.
At some point, it does become about progress. Right now, I agree, but to start the season, I always felt like this is going to be hard for them to get off to a good start because it just, so I always felt like the second half of the year, those excuses are out the window. You better be playing better. And so, where do you think they go from this week? I mean, we've got to cover a game. They got the Browns this week. So what do you think we're going to be looking at here?
Yeah, if you were to rank the panic levels here, I do think offensive line is number one. You've got to figure out something here on the offensive line to get a little bit better, just time, feel, progress offensively. I think that's probably, the one thing you need to really go back to the drawing board on this week. And then I think it's probably Apke on the defense because, Kendall Fuller will be ready when Kendall Fuller's ready. And you're hoping, obviously, that's for this week against the Browns. That would be a difference maker. If not, there's nothing you can do about that. Right. I think the win against the Eagles was really important just in the sense that, now the sky doesn't fall. Even if right. And I think we've all chalked up the Ravens game as a probable loss. That's going
to be a trouble game for anybody on their schedule.
Good football team, but it takes the pressure off of Cleveland that you don't want to start.
Oh, wait a minute, this is the football team.
You've got that one in the cut. You didn't get shut out.
Right.
Rivera's saying,
right.
I didn't want to be shut out. They're not shut out. They have one in the win column, and that's awesome. Because it really takes the pressure off. You got to beat Cleveland, otherwise you're going to 0-4. Right. It's all right. They've got one in the win column, less pressure, but I do think it's a better matchup. I expect to see strides over the course of this next week.
That's what the season becomes about. Do you see that progress? And sometimes it's going to be week to week. Sometimes it's going to be over the course of a month, and you start to see them playing better. That's what it has to be about. Last time we were in Arizona, we made a trip to the Grand Canyon in the Michael Phillips minivan special where we're passing BMWs on the road. No lie. So what did you do yesterday? Those of us who aren't going on the road, what did you do?
I went to the Salt River Canyon, which is only about an hour. The Grand Canyon was 4 hours, you might remember.
Yes.
Certain people fell asleep in the car. It was very contentious. The Salt River Canyon is about 60 minutes outside of town. It's billed as Arizona's other canyon. It would be an all-star canyon in 49 other states. It was really nice. I woke up so early. I woke up at 4 a.m., of course, because I'm not adjusted at all out here. So went out, did some hiking, met up with Les Carpenter of the Washington Post. We traded war stories at his hotel. And then he tried to get us a dinner table at his hotel, the Marriott. And they were telling him we're all booked. And he was trying to explain, I'm staying at the hotel. This is the hotel restaurant. What do you mean you're all booked? It was it was this year's Eclair moment for sure.
Yes.
Was Les Carpenter trying to get a table at his hotel restaurant.
And I'll explain the Eclair thing at a later time. That's a very inside joke. All right, well, what happened was we went to a gas station, and they have, in those little donut things, they have those, those Eclair-shaped things. An Eclair has filling in the middle. So I'm buying that, think it's an Eclair. They don't tell you it's not an Eclair. You think it's an Eclair. So I buy it, and I don't eat a lot of donuts. It was a treat for me, man. I get in the car, and I take a bite, and there's no cream filling. False advertising, man.
Well, you got the home field advantage in Cleveland next week, so I fully expect we'll be getting the John Keim experience around town.
There you go. All right, Michael, thanks a lot for joining me. Have a good flight back.
You bet.
Support for this podcast comes from New Balance.
Hey, I'm Becca Bro, Performance Running Product Manager at New Balance. One of the best parts of my job is working with our Team New Balance athletes. Their job is to run fast, really fast. But it's not just about the time on the clock. It's also a state of mind. Feeling fast really matters too. So our mission was to create a confidence-boosting, PR-shattering super shoe, engineered specifically for faster marathons. We've spent years tinkering with different materials, testing in our sports research lab, and getting feedback from some of our fastest athletes. That obsession with speed resulted in the Fuel Cell RC Elite. It's light as a feather with a full-length carbon plate and our highest energy return foam. Because if there's one thing we know about runners, no matter how fast we are, we all want to be faster. Access fast with the Fuel Cell RC Elite. Visit newbalance.com.
Well, that's it for this week. Thanks to Lone Oak Coffee for their continued sponsorship, and thank you for listening. Got a Therapy Thursday coming up, folks. Talk to you next time.